Chapter 14 of No Clue. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. No Clue by James Hay. Chapter 14. Mr. Crown Forms an Alliance. If you've as much as $500 at your disposal, pin money savings perhaps, anything you can check on without the knowledge of others, you can do it, Hastings urged, ending a long argument. I? Take it to her myself? Lucille still protested, although she could not refute his reasonings. It's the only way that would be effective, and it wouldn't be so difficult. I had counted on your courage, your unusual courage. But what will it accomplish? If I could only see that clearly. She was beginning to yield to his insistence. They were in the rose garden, in the shade of a little arbor from whose roof the great red flowers drooped almost to the girl's hair. He was acutely aware of the pathetic contrast between her white, ravaged face and the surrounding scene, the fragrance, the roses of every color swaying to the slow breeze of late afternoon, the long, cool shadows. He found it hard to force her to the plan, and would have abandoned it but for the possibilities it presented to his mind. "I've already touched on that," he applied himself to her doubts. "I want you to trust me there, to accept my solemn assurance that, if Mrs. Brace accepts this money from you on our terms, it will hasten my capture of the murderer. I'll say more than that. You are my only possible help in the matter. Won't you believe me?" She sat quite still, a long time, looking steadily at him with unseeing eyes. "I shall have to go to that dreadful woman's apartment, be alone with her, make a secret bargain." She enumerated the various parts of her task, wonder and repugnance mingling in her voice. "That horrible woman! You say yourself, Mr. Hastings, she's horrible." "Still," he repeated, "you can do it." A little while ago she had cried out, both hands clenched on the arm of the rustic bench, her eyes opening wide in the startled look he had come to know. "If I could do something, anything, for Berne! Dr. Wells said only an hour ago he had no more than an even chance for his life. Half the time he can't speak. And I'm responsible. I am. I know it. I try to think I'm not, but I am." He recurred to that. "Dr. Wells said the ending of Mr. Webster's suspense would be the best medicine for him. And I think Webster would see that nobody but you could do this, in the very nature of things. The absolute secrecy required, the fact that you buy her silence, pay her to cease her accusations against Berne. Don't you see? He'd want you to do it." That finished her resistance. She made him repeat all his directions, precautions for secrecy. "I wish I could tell you how important it is," he said. "And keep this in mind always. I rely on your paying her the money without even a suspicion of it getting abroad. If accidents happened and you're seen entering the Walman, what more natural than that you want to ask this woman the meaning of her vague threats against Sloanehurst? But of money, your real object, not a word. Nobody's to have a hint of it." "Oh, yes, I see the necessity of that." But she was distressed. "Suppose she refuses?" Her altered frame of mind, an eagerness now to succeed with the plan she had at first refused, brought him again his thought of yesterday. If she were put to it, if she could save only one, and had to choose between father and fiancé, her choice would be for the fiancé. He answered her question. "She won't refuse," he declared, with a confidence she could not doubt. "If I thought she would, I'd almost be willing to say we'd never find the man who killed her daughter."
"When I think of Russell's alibi—"
"Have we mentioned Russell?" he protested, laughing away her fears. "Anyway, his old alibi's no good, if that's what's troubling you. Wait and see." He was in high good humor. In that same hour the woman for whom he had planned this trap was busy with a scheme of her own. Her object was to form an alliance with Sheriff Crown. That gentleman, to use his expressive phrase, had been "putting her over the jumps" for the past 40 minutes, bringing to the work of cross-questioning her all the intelligence, craftiness, and logic at his command. The net result of his fusillade of interrogatories, however, was exceedingly meagre. As he sat, caressing his chin and thrusting forward his bristly mustache, Mrs. Brace perceived in his eyes a confession of failure. Although he was far from suspecting it, he presented to her keen scrutiny an amazing figure. She observed that his shoulders drooped, and that, as he slowly produced a handkerchief and mopped his forehead, his movements were eloquent of gloom. In fact, Mr. Crown felt himself at a loss. He had come to the end of his resourcefulness in the art of probing for facts. He was about to take his departure, with the secret realization that he had learned nothing new, unless an increased admiration of Mrs. Brace's sharpness of wit might be catalogued as knowledge. She put his thought into language. "You see, Mr. Crown, you're wasting your time shouting at me, bullying me, accusing me of protecting the murderer of my own daughter." There was a new note in her voice, a hint, ever so slight, of a willingness to be friendly. He was not insensible to it. Hearing it, he put himself on guard, wondering what it portended. "I didn't say that," he contradicted, far from graciousness. "I said you knew a whole lot more about the murder than you'd tell me, anyway." "But why should I want to conceal anything that might bring the man to justice?" "Blest if I know," he conceded, not without signs of irritation. So far as he could see, not a feature of her face changed. The lifted eyebrows were still high upon her forehead, interrogative and mocking; the restless, gleaming eyes still drilled into various parts of his person and attire; the thin lips continued their moving pictures of contempt. And yet he saw too that she presented to him now another countenance. The change was no more than a shadow, and the shadow was so light that he could not be sure of its meaning. He thought it was friendliness, but that opinion was dulled by recurrence of his admiration of her "smartness." He feared some imposition. "You've adopted Mr. Hastings' absurd theory," she said, as if she wondered. "You've subscribed to it without question." "What theory?" "That I know who the guilty man is." "Well?" He was still on guard. "It surprises me, that's all, a man of your intellect, your originality." She sighed, marvelling at this addition to life's conundrums. "Why?" he asked bluntly. "I should never have thought you'd put yourself in that position before the public. I mean, letting him lead you around by the nose, figuratively." Mr. Crown started forward in his chair, eyes popped. He was indignant and surprised. "Is that what they're saying?" he demanded. "Naturally," she said, and with the one word laid it down as an impossibility that "they" could have said anything else. "That's what the reporters tell me." "Well, I'll be doggoned!" The knuckle-like chin dropped. "They're saying that, are they?" Disturbed as he was, he noticed that she regarded him with apparently genuine interest, that perhaps she added to her interest a